I should have stayed quiet that night, because silence had always kept me safe. But the moment the wine hit my hand, I knew something had already changed. The restaurant glowed in soft gold light, the kind that made everything look more expensive than it really was, and I moved through it like I always did, quiet, careful, invisible. My name is Emily Carter, 24, working double shifts 6 days a week just to keep the lights on in a 2-bedroom apartment I shared with my younger sister. And I had learned early that people like me didn't get second chances in places like this. You smiled. You nodded. You kept your head down. That was the rule. The Romano family didn't follow rules, they were the reason rules existed. You could feel it before you even saw them. The way conversations dipped. The way waitstaff straightened. The way the air itself seemed to hold its breath. When they walked in, everything shifted. Expensive suits, quiet confidence, the kind of presence that didn't need to be loud to be felt. I kept my eyes down, focusing on my tray, on the polished glasses reflecting the chandelier light. But I still noticed him. Adrian Romano, early 30s, dark suit that fit like it was made just for him, posture relaxed but controlled, like nothing in the room could surprise him. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. People moved around him like he was gravity. And for 1 second, just when his eyes lifted and met mine, it wasn't curiosity. It was assessment. Like he was memorizing something. I looked away first. I always did. Table 12 was theirs. VIP section, velvet rope, low lighting, the kind of place where mistakes didn't just cost you tips, they cost you your job. I approached with steady hands, or at least hands that looked steady. "Good evening," I said, voice soft, practiced. "Can I start you with something to drink?" His mother answered before he could. Victoria Romano. Elegant, sharp. The kind of woman who didn't raise her voice because she didn't need to. "Red wine," she said, barely looking at me. "And be careful this time." I nodded. "Of course, ma'am." I turned, walked back, poured the wine exactly the way they trained us Tono spills. No hesitation. Perfect angle. I returned, lifted the glass toward her, and that's when it happened. She didn't reach for it. She didn't thank me. Instead, her hand moved quick, deliberate, and the wine tipped. It spilled straight onto my wrist, warm, dark, staining the white cuff of my uniform. For a second, I thought it was an accident. People make mistakes, even powerful people. But then I looked up, and she was watching me, not surprised, not apologetic, just waiting, waiting to see what I would do. My skin tingled where the wine soaked in, my heart pounding louder than the music playing softly in the background. And I felt every eye in the room shift toward us without anyone actually turning their head. This was the moment, the one where I lowered my gaze, apologized for something that wasn't my fault, cleaned it up, and disappeared back into the background where I belonged. That was what I had always done. That was how I survived. My fingers tightened slightly around the tray. I could feel the weight of it, the balance, the expectation. I lowered my eyes for a second, just a second. And then I heard my sister's voice in my head, clear as if she were standing beside me. "Don't let them make you small." I inhaled slowly, the kind of breath that steadies something deeper than nerves. And when I looked back up, I didn't feel invisible anymore. I held her gaze, and for the first time since I had started working here, I did not look away. The wine was still warm against my skin, slowly dripping down to my wrist, but I did not move to wipe it. I did not apologize. The silence stretched, thin and fragile, like something that could shatter if anyone dared to breathe too loudly. Around us, forks paused mid-air, conversations faded into whispers, and even the soft music seemed to disappear into the background. "Mrs. Romano tilted her head slightly, studying me as if I were something unexpected, something that did not quite belong in the neat little world she controlled. "Well," she said, her voice calm but edged with something sharper. "Are you going to stand there, or are you going to fix your mistake?" My heart pounded once, hard, then again, but my voice, when it came, did not shake. "I would be happy to replace the glass," I said evenly, "but I did not make a mistake." The words landed softly, but they carried further than I expected. I saw it in the way the man at the next table lowered his glass, in the way one of the managers froze near the bar, unsure whether to step in or disappear. Mrs. Romano's expression did not change, but something in her eyes shifted. A flicker of disbelief, maybe even irritation. People did not speak to her like that. Not here, not anywhere. "Excuse me?" she asked, her tone quieter now, more dangerous in its precision. I felt the tray steady in my hands, felt my shoulders straighten without thinking, like my body had finally decided to catch up with something my mind had already accepted. "The wine spilled," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. But it was not an accident. The words hung there, undeniable and clear. A few people looked away quickly, pretending they had not heard, but the tension only grew heavier. I was aware of everything all at once. The faint clink of glass in the distance, the hum of the air conditioning, the way my pulse seemed to echo in my ears. And then, without meaning to, my eyes shifted for just a second. To him. Adrian Romano had not moved. He had not said a word since the moment it happened. But he was watching. Not his mother. Me. His expression was unreadable, calm in a way that felt intentional, like he was waiting to see how far this would go. When my eyes met his again, something inside me tightened. Not fear, not exactly, but awareness. He was not surprised. If anything, he looked interested. I turned back before I could think too much about it. "Mrs. Romano set her glass down slowly, the soft click against the table echoing louder than it should have. "You are very bold," she said, her voice smooth, almost amused now. "For someone in your position." I swallowed, not from fear, but to steady the weight of what I was about to say. "Respect is not a position," I replied quietly. "It is a choice." For a moment, there was nothing, no movement, no sound, just the weight of that sentence, settling into the room. I could feel it. The shift, subtle but undeniable. Something had changed. Not just in her expression, but in the air itself. And then, somewhere behind me, I heard a chair move. Slow. Deliberate. I did not need to turn to know who it was. I heard the chair move behind me. Slow and deliberate. The kind of sound that did not need to be loud to command attention. And the entire room seemed to react before I even turned, like everyone already knew what that meant, except me. My grip tightened slightly on the tray, not out of fear, but because something about that single movement shifted the balance of the moment in a way I could not yet understand. "Mrs. Romano did not look away from me, but I saw it. The smallest change in her posture, the subtle straightening of her shoulders as if she were preparing for something. Then his voice came, calm, measured, carrying across the table without effort. "That is enough." It was not loud. It did not need to be. The words landed with a quiet authority that settled over the room like a final decision. I turned slowly, and Adrian Romano was already standing. Up close. He seemed even more controlled. Every movement precise, every detail intentional. From the way his jacket fell perfectly into place to the steady focus in his eyes. He did not look at me first. He looked at his mother. "We are here for dinner," he said, his tone even, but there was something beneath it, something that did not invite argument. "Not for this." For a second, I thought she might respond, might push back, but she did not. Instead, she studied him, the same way she had studied me, weighing something I could not see, something deeper than the moment itself. Then her attention shifted back to me, and for the first time since I had approached the table, her expression softened just enough to be noticeable. Not kind, not warm, but different. "You may go," she said, her voice composed again, as if nothing had happened, as if the entire exchange had been nothing more than a passing inconvenience. I did not move right away. Not because I was defying her, but because I needed to understand what had just happened, needed to steady the strange mix of adrenaline and clarity running through me. Then I nodded once, set the tray down on the edge of the table, and reached for a clean cloth. I wiped the spill from my wrist slowly, deliberately, as if finishing the moment on my own terms, not theirs. When I turned to leave, I could feel the weight of every gaze following me, not with judgment this time, but with something closer to curiosity. Halfway across the room, I heard footsteps behind me. Not rushed, not hesitant, certain. I stopped before I could think better of it, turning just enough to see him again. Adrian had followed. Not all the way, not close enough to make a scene, but far enough that it was unmistakable. He stopped a few feet away, hands relaxed at his sides, his presence still carrying that same quiet gravity. "What is your name?" he asked. Simple. Direct. No introduction. No explanation. For a second, I considered not answering. That would have been the safe choice, the familiar one. But something about the way he asked, not as a demand, not as a command, but as if the answer actually mattered, made it harder to fall back into silence. "Emily," I said. "Emily Carter." He nodded once, as if committing it to memory, and there was a brief pause, just long enough to feel intentional. "You were right," he said finally. The words caught me off guard, not because of what they meant, but because of how simply he said them, like it was the most natural thing in the world to acknowledge it. I frowned slightly, unsure how to respond, and before I could say anything, he added, "Quieter now. Respect is a choice." Then he stepped back, just as deliberately as he had stepped forward, turning toward his table, as if the conversation had already reached its conclusion. I stood there for a second longer, my heart still racing, my mind trying to catch up to what had just happened. I had come in expecting to survive another shift. Instead, I had just been seen. And somehow, that felt more dangerous than anything else. I should have walked away then, returned to the kitchen, finished my shift like nothing had happened, because that is what people like me are supposed to do when the moment passes. But my feet did not move right away, and that hesitation cost me more than I expected. The manager appeared at my side almost instantly, his voice low and tight with forced control. "Emily," he said, not looking at me directly, "back to work." I nodded, because this time I understood the rule again. Keep moving. Do not make it worse. I turned, stepped into the rhythm of the restaurant, picked up another tray, took another order, but everything felt louder. The clink of silverware, the murmur of conversations, the way people glanced at me and then quickly looked away. They had seen it, all of it, and they would remember. 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Time moved strangely when your heart had not quite settled back into place. I avoided table 12, not intentionally, but instinctively. Someone else delivered their main course. Someone else refilled their glasses. I stayed in my section, focused on small, manageable things. Water, bread, smiles that felt more real than they had before. Then the manager called my name again. This time, I felt it before I heard it. The tension in his voice. The hesitation. "Emily," he said, a little louder now. "They are asking for you." My stomach tightened. I did not ask who they were. I already knew. I set down the tray in my hands, wiped my palms against my apron without thinking, and walked back toward the velvet rope. Each step felt measured, deliberate, like I was walking into something I could not yet see the shape of. When I reached the table, Mrs. Romano did not look at me right away. She was speaking softly to someone across from her, her posture composed, her expression unreadable again. For a second, I wondered if this was how it would end, with a quiet dismissal, a reminder of my place delivered in a more polished way. Then Adrian looked up, and just like before, everything else seemed to fall into the background. "We are ready to order," he said, his tone neutral, professional, as if nothing unusual had happened between us at all. It should have felt like a relief. It did not, because I could feel it, the difference beneath the surface, the awareness, the choice. I nodded, pulled out my notepad, and met his gaze just long enough to answer. "Of course." He listed the orders calmly, precise, efficient, every detail clear. I wrote them down, my hands steady again, my voice returning to that practiced rhythm I knew so well. But when he finished, he did not look away. He held my gaze for a second longer than necessary, just enough to make it intentional. Then he added, "Quieter now, and a fresh glass of wine." It was not directed at his mother. It was not directed at the table. It was directed at me. I understood immediately. I nodded once. Yes, sir. I turned to leave, but Mrs. Romano spoke before I could take a step. Emily. My name sounded different in her voice this time. Not sharp, not dismissive, controlled, but measured. I paused, turning back slightly. She studied me again, the same careful way as before. But whatever she had been measuring earlier, she had already decided. Make sure it is the right temperature, she said. Simple, ordinary, but there was no edge to it. No test. Just an instruction. I inclined my head. It will be. When I walked away this time, the room did not feel the same. Not because anything had visibly changed, but because something had. Subtle, quiet, real. I reached the bar, poured the wine carefully, watched the deep red swirl against the glass, and for a second, I saw my reflection in it. Not smaller, not invisible, just steady. When I returned to the table, I placed the glass in front of her without a word. She accepted it with a slight nod. No apology, no acknowledgement. But something else passed between us. Something that did not need to be said. As I turned to leave again, Adrian's voice followed me, soft enough that only I could hear. Emily. I stopped, just for a moment. Do not go anywhere after your shift, he said. Not a command. Not exactly. But not a suggestion either. I did not answer. I did not turn. I just walked away, my pulse quickening again, because for the first time that night, I did not know if I wanted to leave or stay. I told myself I would ignore what he said, because men like Adrian Romano did not ask for things without expecting them to happen, and people like me did not get involved in expectations like that without consequences, but the words stayed with me anyway, echoing in the back of my mind with every step I took for the rest of the night. The shift dragged on, slower than usual, every minute stretching just enough to make me aware of it. I refilled glasses, cleared plates, smiled at customers who did not know my name and did not need to, but my attention kept drifting back to table 12 without permission. Not to his mother, not to the others. To him? Adrian did not look at me often, but when he did, it felt deliberate, like each glance was chosen, not accidental. It was not curiosity anymore. It was something else, something I could not quite define, but could not ignore either. By the time the last check was signed and the final guests began to leave, the restaurant felt different again, quieter, like the energy that had filled it earlier had slowly drained away. I moved through closing tasks automatically, stacking plates, wiping down tables, counting tips with hands that were steady again but not quite calm. When I checked the time, it was almost 11:30. Later than I had planned. Later than I had promised my sister I would be home. I told myself that was my answer. I would leave. I would go home. I would pretend tonight had been nothing more than a strange shift that would fade by morning. I untied my apron, folded it neatly, placed it in my locker, and reached for my bag. That was when I felt it again. Not a sound, not a voice. Just the awareness of someone standing nearby. I turned slowly, and he was there. Adrian Romano did not belong in the narrow hallway behind the kitchen, surrounded by metal shelves and fluorescent lighting that flickered faintly overhead. The space felt too small for him, like it had not been built to hold someone with that kind of presence. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, but nothing about him felt casual. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable. It was intentional. You stayed, he said finally, his voice low, steady. I frowned slightly. I work here, I replied. It was the simplest answer, the safest one. A faint shift in his expression, almost a hint of something that could have been amusement, but it disappeared as quickly as it came. That is not what I meant. I hesitated, then exhaled quietly. I did not think you were asking, I said. He nodded once, like he had expected that answer, like it confirmed something. I was not, he admitted. Honesty, direct, no apology for it. I adjusted the strap of my bag on my shoulder, grounding myself in something familiar. Then what do you want? The question came out more direct than I intended, but I did not take it back. His gaze held mine, steady and unreadable, but there was no pressure in it. No force. Just focus. To understand something, he said. I waited. He took a small step closer, not enough to invade my space, but enough to make the distance between us feel intentional. Why did you not lower your head? The question caught me off guard, not because of what he asked, but because of how he asked it. Not accusing, not challenging, just curious. I looked at him for a moment, really looked this time, at the calm control in his posture, the quiet authority that did not need to be proven. And something in me shifted again, something that had already started to change earlier that night. Because I have done that before, I said slowly. And it never made anything better. The words felt heavier than I expected, like they carried more than just tonight. He watched me closely, not interrupting, not reacting, just listening in a way that felt rare. I continued before I could stop myself. It just made it easier for people to think they could do it again. Silence followed. Not empty, not awkward, just real. Adrian's gaze softened, just slightly, the edge of calculation easing into something quieter. Most people choose easier, he said. I shook my head faintly. It is only easier for them. That was when something changed. Not in the room, not in the moment, in him. It was subtle, almost invisible, but I felt it. The shift from observation to decision. He straightened slightly, as if settling into something he had already chosen. You are not what I expected, he said. I let out a small breath, something close to a laugh but without humor. I do not think I was supposed to be expected at all. This time, the hint of amusement in his expression stayed just a second longer. That may be the problem, he said quietly. Then he reached into his jacket, pulled out a card, and held it out to me. Simple, clean, a name, a number, nothing else. I looked at it, then back at him. I am not looking for a new job, I said. That is not what this is, he replied. His voice did not change, but something in the weight of his words did. Then what is it? He met my gaze fully now. No distance, no hesitation. A choice, he said. And for the first time that night, I felt something I had not expected at all. Not fear, not pressure, possibility. I looked at the card in his hand, then back at his face, weighing something I could not quite name, because people like him did not offer things without meaning more than they said. And people like me did not accept things without knowing the cost. But something about the way he stood there, not pushing, not insisting, made it harder to fall back into the version of myself that always said no first. I do not take things I do not understand, I said finally, my voice quieter now but still steady. He did not withdraw the card. He did not move at all. Then understand this, he replied, his tone even, controlled. You were seen tonight. The words settled differently than I expected. Not as a compliment, not as a warning, something in between. I held his gaze, searching for what he meant, but his expression gave nothing away except certainty. That is not always a good thing, I said. No, he agreed without hesitation, it is not. The honesty in that answer made something tighten in my chest, because it confirmed what I already knew but had not wanted to say out loud. Being noticed meant being remembered. And being remembered meant you did not get to go back to being invisible again. I glanced down at the card one more time, the clean edge of it catching the light, the simplicity of it almost deceptive. Then I reached out and took it. Not because I had decided anything. Just because not taking it felt like pretending the moment had not happened. And I already knew that was not true. His hand lowered once the card left it, the motion smooth, unhurried, like he had expected that choice all along. You do not have to use it, he said. Then why give it to me? I asked. He paused for a fraction of a second, as if choosing the answer carefully. Because you will, he said. Not arrogant, not forceful, just certain. I exhaled slowly, slipping the card into my bag, more to end the moment than anything else. You seem very sure about things, I said. I am, he replied. There was no hesitation in it, no doubt. And somehow, that did not feel like confidence. It felt like experience. I shifted my weight slightly, suddenly aware of how late it was, of the quiet hallway, of the fact that this conversation existed completely outside the world I was used to. I should go, I said. This time, he did not stop me. He stepped back instead, creating space, the movement deliberate, respectful, in a way I had not expected from someone like him. Emily, he said once more, his voice softer now, not carrying the same authority as before, but something else entirely. I paused at the edge of the hallway, turning just enough to meet his gaze one last time. Be careful who notices you next, he said. The words lingered longer than they should have, heavier than a simple warning, and for the first time that night, I felt a flicker of something I could not ignore. Not fear. Not exactly. Awareness. Of a world I had stepped too close to without realizing it. I nodded once, not trusting myself to respond, and turned away, pushing through the back door into the cool night air. The city felt different outside, quieter, sharper. The distant hum of traffic blending with the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the pavement. I walked faster than usual, my mind replaying every moment, every word, every look, trying to make sense of something that refused to fit into anything familiar. By the time I reached the bus stop, I had almost convinced myself it would fade by morning, that it had just been one strange night, that people like Adrian Romano existed in a world that did not overlap with mine. But when I reached into my bag to check my phone, my fingers brushed against the card again, and this time, I did not ignore it. I pulled it out, holding it under the dim light, reading the name printed there like it might tell me something I had missed. It did not. It only confirmed what I already knew. This was not a coincidence. This was not an accident. And whether I wanted it or not, something had already started. I told myself I would not think about him again once I got home, but the city had a way of stretching thoughts into something heavier when you were alone, and by the time the bus pulled up to my stop, the card in my hand felt less like paper and more like a question I had not answered yet. My apartment was exactly the same as I had left it. Small, a little too quiet, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the space in a way that made the silence feel less empty but not less noticeable. I kicked off my shoes near the door, dropped my bag onto the worn couch, and leaned against the wall for a second longer than necessary, letting the day settle into something I could finally process. My sister's voice drifted from the bedroom, soft and half asleep. "Em," she called, "you are home late." I pushed off the wall, forcing my voice back into something normal. "Busy night?" I said, stepping into the room. She was curled under a blanket, phone in hand, eyes heavy but still watching me with that quiet awareness she always had. "You look different," she murmured. I paused. "Different how?" She shrugged slightly, the movement slow with sleep. "Like something happened." I let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh. "Something always happens," I said. It was easier than explaining. Easier than trying to put into words something I did not fully understand myself. She studied me for another second, then nodded like she had decided not to push. "Do not let people make you small," she said softly, repeating the same words she had told me before, the same words that had echoed in my head earlier that night. I swallowed, feeling them land differently now. "I will not," I replied. She smiled faintly, already drifting back towards sleep, and I turned off the light before stepping back into the living room. The quiet returned immediately. I moved through my routine without thinking, grabbing a glass of water, setting it on the counter, staring out the window at the city lights stretching into the distance. From up here, everything looked distant, manageable, like nothing could reach me if I just stayed in place. But my hand drifted back to my bag anyway. I pulled out the card again, holding it between my fingers, tracing the clean edges like I could find something new in it if I looked long enough. Adrian Romano. The name did not come with explanation. It did not need to. The weight of it was enough. I told myself I would put it away, that I would forget about it, that tomorrow would be another shift, another night, another routine that would pull me back into the version of my life I understood. But instead, I set it down on the table in front of me. Not hidden, not ignored, just there, like a decision I had not made yet. I sat on the edge of the couch, staring at it longer than I should have, longer than made sense, until my phone buzzed softly beside me. A message from an unknown number. I frowned, picking it up, hesitating for a fraction of a second before opening it. The message was simple. No introduction, no explanation, just a single line. You made it home. My breath caught slightly, not because I did not expect it, but because part of me had hoped I was wrong. I looked back at the card on the table, then at the message again, the connection immediate and undeniable. My fingers hovered over the screen, unsure whether to respond, unsure what responding would even mean. Then, slowly, I typed 3 words. Nothing more, nothing less. How do you know? The reply came almost instantly. I pay attention. I stared at the screen, the words settling into something that felt less like an answer and more like a confirmation of everything I had already started to understand. This was not something I could ignore. This was not something that would fade. And for the first time since I had left the restaurant, I realized something that made my pulse shift in a way I could not quite control. I had not just been noticed, I had been chosen. I should have ignored the message, because people like him did not pay attention in harmless ways, and people like me did not get involved in that kind of attention without it changing something. But my fingers did not move away from the phone. They stayed there, hovering, like part of me had already stepped past the line my mind was still trying to draw. The 3 dots appeared almost instantly, then disappeared, then came back again, like even he was choosing his words. You took the bus? The next message read. You walked 2 blocks instead of 1. My chest tightened slightly. Not fear. Not yet. Just awareness. He was not guessing. He knew. I glanced toward the window instinctively. The city outside still calm, still distant, but it did not feel the same anymore. That is not comforting, I typed back, my tone more controlled than I felt. The reply came slower this time. It is not meant to be. Honest again, direct in a way that left no space to misunderstand. I exhaled quietly, setting the phone down for a second, running a hand through my hair as I tried to steady the shift happening inside me. This was the moment where I should stop, where I should block the number, put the card away, go to sleep, and wake up tomorrow pretending none of this had ever happened. That was the safe choice. The smart one. The version of me that had always survived would have already done it. But that version of me had also stood there earlier that night, head lowered, saying nothing. And I had not done that either. My phone buzzed again, pulling me back before I could decide. Are you afraid? He asked. Simple. No pressure in the words, but the question itself felt heavier than anything else he had said. I stared at it longer than I should have, feeling the truth settle in slowly. Not all at once, but piece by piece. I am aware, I replied finally. It was the closest thing to honesty I could give without giving too much. There was a pause after that, longer than before, and for a second I wondered if I had said something wrong, if I had pushed too far into a space I did not understand. Then his reply came. Good. Just 1 word. Not reassurance, not dismissal. Something else. Something that felt like approval. I leaned back against the couch, the quiet of the apartment pressing in again, but this time it felt different. Like the space around me had shifted in ways I could not see but could still feel. What do you want from me? I typed, the question direct, because anything less felt pointless now. The answer did not come immediately. When it did, it was not what I expected. Nothing you do not choose. I read it twice, then a 3rd time, trying to find the catch in it, the part where the meaning changed, but it stayed exactly the same. That was what made it more dangerous. Choice meant responsibility. It meant I could not blame anyone else for what came next. My fingers rested on the screen, the weight of the moment settling deeper than before, and for the first time, I realized this was not about him anymore. It was about me. About whether I stayed where I was or stepped into something I did not understand. I glanced at the card again on the table, then back at the phone, the connection between them clear now in a way it had not been before. Then why me? I asked. This time, the response came without hesitation. Because you did not lower your head. I closed my eyes for a second, the memory flashing back, the wine, the silence, the choice I had made without knowing where it would lead. When I opened them again, the room felt smaller, not physically, but in the way possibilities can make everything else feel limited. I picked up the card once more, holding it between my fingers, then looked at the screen one last time. "And if I choose to walk away?" I typed. The reply came slower, deliberate, like he was giving the answer the weight it deserved. "Then you walk away. No threat, no pressure, just certainty." I sat there in the quiet, the city stretching beyond the window, my life exactly as it had been just hours ago, and yet completely different, because now I understood something I had not before. The moment you are given a real choice, staying the same is no longer as simple as it used to be. I did not sleep much that night, not because I was afraid, but because my mind refused to settle into something simple again, and by the time the first light slipped through the window, I was already awake, staring at the ceiling like it might offer answers it did not have. The card was still on the table where I had left it, exactly the same, but it did not feel the same anymore. It felt heavier now, defined, like it carried something I had already started to accept without saying it out loud. My sister was still asleep when I moved quietly through the apartment, getting ready for another shift, another day that was supposed to feel normal again. I told myself it would. I told myself routine would fix it. Coffee, bus, work, the same pattern that had always worked before. But as I stepped outside, the air felt sharper, like I was noticing things I used to ignore. The distance between buildings, the way people moved around each other, the subtle awareness that I was not just part of the background anymore. I kept walking. The bus ride was quieter than usual, or maybe I was just listening differently. Every stop felt slower. Every glance from a stranger felt more intentional, even when it probably was not. I kept my phone in my pocket this time. I did not check it. I did not look for messages. I did not need to. The conversation from the night before had already settled into something that did not need repeating. When I arrived at the restaurant, everything looked exactly the same. Same lighting, same polished surfaces, same quiet tension behind the smiles of the staff. But the moment I stepped inside, I felt it again. That shift. Subtle, but real. People looked at me differently. Not openly, not enough to be obvious, but enough that I noticed. The manager gave me a quick nod, more cautious than usual. A coworker paused for a second before speaking, like she was choosing her words more carefully. They had all seen it, and they had not forgotten. I tied my apron, slipped back into the role I knew so well, but it did not fit the same way anymore. It felt thinner, like something underneath it had changed, even if everything else looked the same. The lunch rush came and went, steady and predictable, grounding in a way I almost needed. Orders, plates, smiles. The rhythm of it pulled me back just enough to breathe normally again. For a while, I almost believed I could leave it behind, that whatever had started the night before would stay there. Then the front door opened. I did not need to look to know. The room reacted before I did. Conversations dipped, movement slowed. That same invisible shift moved through the space like a quiet signal. I kept my eyes on the table in front of me, finishing what I was doing, refusing to turn immediately. Because this time, I had a choice about how I faced it. When I finally looked up, he was already inside. Adrian Romano moved through the room the same way as before. Controlled, deliberate, the kind of presence that did not demand attention, but received it anyway. But today was different. Today, he was not here with a group, not with his mother, just him. And he was not looking around the room, he was looking at me. Direct, certain, like he had not come here for anything else. My pulse shifted, not faster, not slower, just aware again. Of him, of myself, of the space between us that suddenly felt smaller than it should have. He did not stop at the entrance. He walked straight toward me, each step measured, each movement intentional, until he was close enough that I could hear the quiet sound of his breath when he spoke. "Good morning, Emily." Simple, calm, like this was normal. Like yesterday had not changed anything. But it had. I held his gaze, steady, not lowering it this time, not stepping back, not pretending this was just another customer. "Good morning," I replied, my voice even, controlled, matching his tone without trying to. There was a brief pause, just long enough to feel like something important had already passed between us without words. Then he spoke again, softer now, but no less certain. Walk with me. Not a command, not a request, something in between. And for the first time since this had started, I did not immediately think about saying no, because now, I understood something I had not before. Some choices do not feel like leaving. They feel like stepping into something that has already been waiting.